thank you very much for coming on the Source Material Comics podcast. We just hung out there. What was it, like 2 weeks ago? We played some Magic the Gathering at my house. First time I ever got to meet you in person. I've known you for a long time, but had a good time. So now you get to come on my comics podcast, and we're going to be talking about Eternals. So I want to ask, what drew you to this Eternals book, and what made you say, yeah, I'll come on and talk about it?
You said Neil Gaiman, and I'm like, I'm there.
Neil Gaiman and I, we've had our fair share of spending time where I've read some of his works. I will just tell you that I most likely was picking up and reading like trades from the library. Hey, you and I, we both respect and love the
library. All right. Yep. We just cursed the podcast.
Yeah. I'd get trades from the Library of Sandman, sit down and read. And I remember being intimidated because I'm Mr. Image. I'm Mr. 90s. I like to pick up my comic books and not have them laden with prose and text. Gaiman could sometimes lean that way. It's not like it was really bad, but you could get some lengthy words. And so when it was like, hey, we're going to be doing Eternals and we're going to be doing Neil Gaiman's Eternals, I was like, oh man, what am I going to be in for? The Eternals, for me, pretty big blind spot. How about you, Coop? Do you know much about the Eternals?
Not a whole lot. I know really my only exposure to most of Marvel's cosmic stuff was during my heyday of buying comics between 2006 and 2010. Okay. Because at that point, my local shop closed down. Like, I read all the Annihilation stuff. I pretty much read all 4 of those miniseries, read some Guardians of the Galaxy, Nova Corps, and of course, from the Infinity Gauntlet trade, I got to see all the celestial beings and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
Because Thanos dominated all of them. But, I mean, otherwise, most of this, which it's really funny, the Eternals, when you look at it, almost seem like a redo of Jack Kirby's New Gods. Well, because if I'm not mistaken, this is a Jack Kirby creation.
Yes, it is. Jack Kirby, I think Kirby's got that knack for doing cosmic stuff.
I really have not a whole lot, because even when I was buying, well, I wasn't buying, my stepdad was buying the comics with me every week. Every Wednesday, go to the comic shop and hang out. That was I grew up in high school reading comic books, and that was my thing, I was the guy that read comic books all day. And what's really funny now is, as a grown-ass man who I don't really reread things or rewatch things as much, having those singles, those floppies, even though they were all bagged and board, like, in retrospect, I kind of wish I just did more trade paperbacks.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have it all there. Like, I mean, I've got some really good ones. Like, I've got the entire collection of 52, and that's awesome. Like, I have all the single issues, and I've got some really stuff I really love in singles, but I also kind of realize that it's a little more inconvenient to not just have them in one book.
Yeah, you're talking to a guy who moved 13, I want to say maybe it's 18 long boxes of comics when we moved. And I'm not taking these comics with me. I don't plan on it if we move out of this house again.
I thought you were going to say when I die. I was like, sure you don't want a casket built out of your bricks of comic books?
No, I'll pass. But I do not want to lug these things up the stairs. To your point, yes, having a story that you really like and really love in a trade it's great. I mean, you don't have to worry about the condition of the or condition of the issues. You got it all there. You can just grab that off the shelf and read it.
In a way, it's almost kind of funny, though, and that part of me really misses that weekly go to the comic shop and pick up those new issues and see what's really out and about. I was actually, before we entered our call, I was just trying to read like the best comics of 2021, because I really want to get back into reading comics. But I'll say that I know the industry itself is really hurting, because I feel it has a real identity crisis. I do find maybe interesting with a property, just like with Guardians of the Galaxy, like with the Eternals, to where it's a lot more of a blank slate. You can mold these new stories around the stories that are being told in your cinematic universes, and you're not really going to alienate as many people. You're not going to have as much of a whiplash in terms of what you're really trying to offer. What I've noticed, especially with Marvel, because Marvel, it is a cultural capstone, man. I tell you,
it is, dude.
What I have found on my time and back on the dating sites is Marvel movies are no longer a nerd thing. It is just a people thing.
Right, dude.
So many girls are like, I really like Marvel movies. And I'm like, uh-huh. I'm sure you do, which I'm sure they do, but that doesn't mean what it used to. When the first Iron Man came out, it wasn't getting that cultural penetration like it does now.
Right.
And with the modern comics industry, just from my outsider looking in perspective, I really feel that they're trying their best to introduce what they're doing to an audience that normally would not read these comic books, but also to try and gear what they're presenting in a way that's going to match what the movies are doing.
Right.
Like, for example, when you had the Defenders hit Netflix, I know they dropped the Defender series starring those characters. Well, anybody who's been reading comics knows that's not the fucking Defenders.
No, it's not.
That's like, if I'm not mistaken, isn't it Doctor Strange, the Hulk, Silver Surfer, Namor? But, when I saw them release that, I was like, all right, I know you got to get that brand synergy going on. Somebody's going to Google Marvel The Defenders. That's going to pop up. It's going to pique their interest. They're going to want to read it.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
But I do really feel the modern comics industry needs to appeal to people other than white middle-aged men.
Sure.
And unfortunately, that's a lot of your business that's going to buy weekly comic books. That is the fan base they've cultivated, which is something I find very interesting when I look at getting back to the Eternals. For example, the casting that they have on this new film is far more diverse than what we saw in this comic book, which still, did have some female representation, which was nice. Not really knowing a whole lot, I was expecting there to be the girl. Yeah, which I knew Kirby created it and Gaiman's writing it, so it's gonna be probably as good as I can think. Because I have a lot of respect for Jack Kirby, but I find very interesting because I know they've since I think in this past year they've rebooted the Eternals again after, spoilers for a comic book, I think it's 7 years old. I know they killed them all off in 2014 or something.
Okay. No, I didn't know
I was reading up. They apparently said, "Oh yeah, no, we didn't create the Eternals to protect mankind. We actually apparently there are dark Celestials that are out to destroy mankind or destroy the universe. And the only reason they wanted mankind protected in any way was because they were going to be the sort of antibody for whatever this virus that was coming along. So it was more of a necessity, far less altruistic. Not knowing much about the Celestials, I know they're a big thing in your sort of cosmic Marvel.
For sure.
But, something that really worked in this comic getting into a little bit was just the scale of what the Celestials are.
Oh, yeah.
Because starting out in the comic, I didn't know what, I was like, all right, what are we doing here? Like, what is this? As you're going through, things are slowly getting reintroduced to you in a way that's very handy, like Amnesia is. It allows your character that you're following to have things that would normally not need to be explained to them.
Right.
Explain to them in a natural way as to introduce that to the
audience. So just real quick, we already talked about it. Neil Gaiman, he is the writer of this story. This came out between August of 2006 to March of 2007. And art, you may recognize the art. It's one John Romita Jr., one of the more famous artists. If you've read, we've talked about him a lot here on the podcast. Daredevil, Man Without Fear. He was the artist for that. When we were talking about Chris Bailey earlier, he is not a fan of John Romita Jr.'s drawing.
Because they all kind of look the same.
They all got the blocky face. Anyway.
You know who my number one problem artist is with that?
Tell me.
Howard Chaykin. Anytime I saw any of his art in late 2000s Marvel, I knew all the characters were going to have that same sort of facial structure and they were going to have the same line patterns. And I kind of felt like a lot of it looked the same. Like I think he did Blade in like the mid 2000s and I think he did some Punisher work as well. Yeah, he did Punisher War Journal in 2008. The 2006 Blade series. Ooh, he did Magneto #1 in 2010. He did Avengers 1959 in 2011.
I see what you're talking about, though, with the same facial structure. And that's very representative of what JR does. Yeah, he's got this real kind of blocky
Their
style.
noses are all very similar as well.
Yeah. So, but I will say that this book did not grind on me like some of the other stuff that I've seen. And specifically the fact that he can draw a celestial or a group of celestials and make it look like, they're these huge, massive creatures. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into the synopsis of our first 3 issues here. Here we go.
That synopsis is coming up, but first let me talk about Amazon Music. If you're looking for a good platform that can fill those musical needs, Amazon Music has you covered. If you head to getamazonmusic.com/W2M Network, you can get a free 30-day trial where you can check out over 70 million songs. That's getamazonmusic.com/W2M Network for that free 30-day trial.
In our first issue, we get our introductions to most of the characters that will be taking part in this story. We first meet Mark Curry, a medical student who has a strange encounter with a man called Ike Harris. Ike explains that he and Mark are immortals created by a race of gigantic spaceborne beings called the Celestials who visited Earth long ago. The Celestials seeded life on the planet but also created the Deviants, a violent race that enslaved humanity but then began to experiment on the Eternals after the Celestials head back into space. This starts a deadly war between the Deviants and the Eternals. When the Eternals call the Celestials to return, they arrive and are displeased and wipe out most of the Deviants. Over the thousands of years since, the Eternals began to help human society progress. But Ike says something bad happened. Many of the Eternals began to forget who they were, and Ike is trying to figure out why. Ike's revelation to Mark falls on deaf ears, resulting in Mark unknowingly turning Ike over into the hands of two Deviants. The Deviants take Ike and begin their experiments again, attempting to kill Ike over and over and over until finally obliterating him into atoms. We also get to meet Cersei, a young woman trying to get her party business off the ground. She finds the perfect client in a man by the name of Druig, a dignitary from Vorozheikia, something like that.
Fictional former Soviet bloc nation.
Perfect. Who has her organize a large get-together. The guest list includes some high-importance names, including a weapons developer by the name of Thena, who has some ties to Tony Stark. Prior to this event, Mark runs into Cersei on, I think it was at a coffee shop, and the two seem to naturally be drawn to each other, striking up a friendship. This leads to Cersei bringing Mark along with her as her date to Druig's event. Now, at the event, we soon find out that Druig set all this in motion in order to kidnap the brilliant minds there, using mercenaries to round up the guests. However, when Thena's husband is killed, Druig soon learns he is not the one pulling the strings. Some of the party are rounded up and taken into a helicopter on the roof, leaving many still surrounded by the mercenaries. As the mercs open fire on the crowd, time stops for Mark. He realizes he has super speed. Mark is able to use his ability to take out the mercenaries just before Iron Man shows up. When Iron Man sees Cersei, he recognizes her as she was once an Avenger. However, when she is asked about this, she has no idea what he is talking about. When Iron Man returns home, he finds her records have been wiped from his system. Now, during all this, Druig walks away, beginning to realize he has powers as well, an ability to use words to manipulate people into believing or doing something. Thena was kidnapped and taken to a cell by the mercenaries, but she begins, or the terrorists, whatever you want to call them, but she begins to realize she has an unnatural ability to understand combat techniques and weapons, which she uses to escape as Iron Man shows up to rescue her. By the end of the third issue, we are shown that somewhere in a large facility in Antarctica, Ike, or Icarus, is lying very still, and words indicate he is preparing to reactivate. All right, there you go. That's our first 3 issues.
Part of me was really kind of wondering where they were going to go with it. You know, we get our point of view character, you know, somebody that, you know, if you're an established reader of the lore, you're kind of waiting for that shoe to drop and for him to discover who he is. But you also have it in a way to where if you're not, you know, if you're new, well, you're just along for the ride. You're just there to see what the mystery is as well. I really found our main character here very relatable, as his girlfriend broke up with him and took the cat.
Yeah.
But as he stated later, he was still happy, you know, like he was still a happy person. He was still living a normal life. And just seeing where everything kind of evolves from there in terms of, okay, well, these people are going to have these powers. Seeing like, oh, well, this guy seems like a bad guy. I was thinking, oh, he's going to be the main villain.
Same here. Yeah. Druig. Yeah.
Yeah. Druig, I thought was going to be I thought he was going to be a big force, a big bad, which he's definitely not a good person.
No, he's not.
And as we go through, he definitely does add some tension into the overall atmosphere of the book, but still, at the end of the day, he's still one of the Eternals. I like the fact that there is a lot of kind of subtle world building just throughout. You see the old man with the dog that's just kind of yelling, which I was like, oh, okay, I guess he's going to be important.
Turns out he was quite important.
Yeah, we see the Kid Eternal.
Yeah, Sprite.
Sprite, yeah. We see Sprite. Spoilers for the rest of this podcast. Turns out he's kind of the zeitgeist for all their problems.
He's definitely one of the reasons why they are in the situation they're in.
And it makes sense as to where his logic was for creating these issues, too.
No kidding, yeah.
It makes a lot of sense, but, it's interesting to kind of see how they also integrated a lot of what had been happening in the current Marvel universe at the time as well with the Superhero Registration Act.
Yeah, we had the events of Civil War. I don't know if at this time they had occurred or...
It did.
All right, I know that we're gearing up.
I was reading religiously. You're speaking to a person who, they hand out those checklist cards and stuff.
Yeah.
I had every single comic.
Nice, very nice. And that's one of the things that I liked about Civil War was that it was a very far-reaching concept. Now, granted, it might have felt a little shoehorned in here, but again, Marvel was focusing on making sure that each book feels like it lives in the Marvel universe. The Registration Act, that's a big deal. I mean, that should be affecting every book, any book that is taking place within, the realms of the world or the United States at that point in time.
And I felt like it really worked as an overall event. I know that was my first big Marvel event. I know House of M was before that, and I feel like Civil War was done well. Then that was before you started getting event fatigued, where every event, every year has to have some ground shaking. It has to have something earth-shattering and ground-shaking and life-changing.
Yeah.
And there's a certain point to where you get to... It's almost like in professional wrestling where if you do... Like, I love flippy matches, don't get me wrong, but there's going to be a certain point that you're just going to keep pushing the envelope until doesn't matter anymore. That's where I feel like the modern comics industry kind of kept pushing towards.
Mm-hmm.
But I like how this book does, I mean, in a way it does with the superhero registration stuff, kind of put it in that 2006 time bubble. It doesn't quite make it as timeless by making it timely, but at the same time, it's something that if you don't know much about it, it's not going to really matter. And, seeing everybody's powers was really cool. I was kind of wondering how it was going to work, like at what point, are these powers going to kick in? Is this something that's only going to be temporary? There's a lot of suspense as to what was going to really happen. Like, I didn't know that they were, as we find out later, essentially robots.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because I had that down here as a question for you, because that happens pretty much at the end of this third issue. We see Icarus or Ike get destroyed. He gets completely just
vaporized.
He's done. He's gone. But then he's laying in, I think, what they call the stasis chamber or something. But it looks like they pounded this guy and he's in a little mold and he's just kind of laying there and he's getting ready to reactivate. And I'm like, whoa, are these dudes robots? That feeds into the mythology of the Celestials. Like when Icarus wakes up, the AI in Olympia is talking to him, and it's like one of the things that keeps referring to him as is like the soul body. And you're like, are they trying to say that these people have souls? And so what does this make the Celestials? I mean, the Celestials, they're not a joke. And I know that obviously that when we get towards the end of this issue, the Celestials are very much realized as a potential threat to the Earth. You could easily compare what happens here to religion a little bit. Like, okay, we got a maker. Somebody made these people. You could say that the Celestials are definitely godlike creatures.
No, I mean, the Celestials are so powerful that, later on, Uatu can't look at it. Galactus poops himself.
It's like, oh, yeah, what was that?
Yeah, like, oh, hell no. Like, these beings, I was reading, it's Wikipedia, so your mileage may vary, but your gods of, like, Odin and Zeus and everything tried to take on the Celestials, and they got curb stomped. Everybody that pretty much tried to take them over got their asses whipped left and right by these beings that more or less created everything, your gods. But in a way, there almost are some Judeo-Christian allegories in here as well, just in terms of, like, I think in some iconography. I do think in some way the Eternals almost seem like, well, I would say prophets, but just more like protectors. I would say angels, but I don't know, man. It was funny. I saw something on Imager about how angels are in the Bible, as somebody who totally has read that in the past 20 years. Has not happened. I've not read the full thing, but apparently, typically, most of your angels are like a flaming ball of like eyeballs, if I'm not mistaken. Like they're quite terrifying, actually. Now they are not cherubs.
Have you had a chance to watch Midnight Mass yet on Netflix?
I just got Netflix access from my lady friend Natalia, who's probably listening to this podcast right now.
Well,
she's wonderful.
It's absolutely wonderful that she shared Netflix with you, because if you have the chance, I'm
sharing with her Disney Plus.
Okay, all right. Well, if you get a chance to watch Midnight Mass, I would highly suggest it. But one of the things that, obviously, if you couldn't tell, it's about a Catholic church. So the preacher is talking about how when angels appeared, one of the things that they always said was, do not fear. Do not fear. It's thought like when you see something like that, angels aren't going to be, dressed in white robes, clasping their hands together with a halo above their head. There's probably a good reason why you look at these things and are absolutely afraid. To kind of throw this out here, and I got a list of them here. We're not going to go into every single one of them, but I just want to list down, the important characters that we kind of already talked about, but I want to give them the actual names of the Eternals. So Zurus, he is the leader of the Eternals. He's the homeless guy that we see in the first part of this book. And all this is revealed. This is not something that we're kind of spoiling in any way, because it's all mentioned by Icarus. Icarus, when he's talking to Mark, he's explaining who these people are. So Zurus is the leader. Ajak, he's also pretty powerful Eternal. Icarus is, I'd maybe, if you want to say Superman, I don't know. It's not. I can't say that he can fly. He's got eye beams. That's probably about the only parallels I can. Then we have Makari, or Mark. Makari is very similar to Mercury. It seems like you can kind of.
Oh yeah. I did not put those two together.
And then of course Athena, which I didn't even write her down here. I don't know why I didn't write her down, but Athena, which reminds, she's tactical genius. Circe, we already talked about her. Druig, and then Sprite. So there's your rundown of Eternals. Now the Deviants, I just want to quickly read from the book here. Imagine a race of people, none of whom was even of the same species, each with a different look, attribute, shape. Every number of the deviant race was a fresh roll of the genetic dice. So the deviants that we get in this book are they're pretty scary. Like they have, one of them's got a freaking mouth on his belly, but they can apparently change their appearance or at least dress up and look human.
Looked like he was wearing a skin suit.
Could be. Now we'd get some glimpses of the Unimind that happens in here, which I didn't bring that up. When Icarus is trying to reach out to Mark, and of course at this time Mark he's still not believing what's going on, but there's this power that the Eternals have where they can share their mind with each other. They can share thoughts, and they can also use that to come together, and it becomes a powerful force. So we do get kind of glimpses of the Unimind happening here. And yeah, we already talked about Icarus. He's definitely going through it as the Deviants are trying to kill him. And I mean, it's not like they just show him get obliterated. They show him getting killed quite a few times in different fashions. And then I thought it was pretty cool to see Makari or Mark find out his powers by the end of that, where I think that third issue. Go ahead.
Yeah, I thought it was very well done solution too, as well as him kind of talking through I got to be really gentle because I could really kill them very easily.
As he's scooping these bullets up with this metal trash can, he's like, I've got to get them somewhere because as soon as this snaps back, all this kinetic energy has got to go somewhere.
I was I never would have thought of that.
Neat scientific explanation to his powers. Druig's powers, those were freaky. Druig was going around and he started to realize that he could, all this chaos is going on. He's like, I've got to get out of here. Obviously things are out of my control. At first he was like, I'm just going to take hostages, and nope, that's not the case anymore. So I've got to find out who stuck a knife in my back and did this to me. So he's trying to leave the facility and people are coming up to him. I think the cops are already there, or they're trying to talk to him and stop him. And all of a sudden he realizes that he can pretty much manipulate people by using his own words into believing something. I think the first cop he comes across, he tells her something about how when she was little, and he knows this stuff about these people, or maybe he's just making it up and they believe it. I don't know. But, when she was little, she was in a crib and she started choking on a toy or something, or maybe, her brother shoved a toy down her throat. I can't remember. But she starts choking and he just walks away and he's like, oh, this is interesting. And it just kind of snowballs from there. As we get into some of the later issues, he starts really exploring. And I do want to throw this out here before we get into the second synopsis here. Athena does have a husband. Now, remember, all these Eternals, most of them, except for Icarus, they don't remember who they are. So Athena has a husband, and there's a flashback scene where, she's clearly been involved with Icarus in the past. These guys have been here for millennia. They're Eternals. There's a bit of a history there, but she has a husband and a son. So that's important. Issues 4 and 5. So Druig arrives in
fictional former Soviet bloc nation.
Perfect. Using his powers to take over the land and become a ruler, Icarus awakens in a very confused state, realizing he is in his home city of Olympia, which I think is below Antarctica. He reaches out to an AI archive to find out why the Eternals have forgotten who they are. He definitely is made aware of the events. Now, after the events of Cersei's party, Mark seeks out the young boy named Sprite. Sprite is a young television star who Icarus mentioned was an Eternal as well during his early conversation with Mark, and after recent events, Mark now believes him. Sprite has no issue with Mark's story, and he takes Mark to a park in San Francisco and goes down a hidden elevator. Underground, Sprite tricks Mark into using his super speed to run into a sleeping Celestial. The Celestial's defenses cause Mark to shut down, giving Sprite the chance to shed some light on things. Sprite has been a boy for, I think, millions of years, is what he said. An Eternal just like them. He has always wanted to grow up and jealous of all of the adult Eternals he lived with. Using his power of illusion, Sprite tricked the Eternals Ajax and Zurus into giving Sprite even more power, bestowing him the ability to warp reality. Using this to his advantage, Sprite causes the other Eternals to lose their memory and turns himself from an Eternal into a mortal boy. Sprite leaves Mark incapacitated and heads up to the surface, only to be captured by the two Deviants that we've been seeing throughout this series. The Deviants go back down to the Celestial and explain that this dreaming Celestial was imprisoned here because it was the only Celestial that spoke up against the others using the Deviants as food. And now events have been put into motion to awaken it. Icarus has stopped by Athena's place to ensure she remembers who she is and tells her they need to go get the others as the dreaming Celestial is about to awaken. They go to recruit a very hesitant Cersei, who is still having trouble believing all of this. Now, on the rainy streets of San Francisco, Ajax, who's perfectly aware of what's going on, finds Zurus living as a homeless man without his memory. Ajax is able to have Zurus recall he is the mightiest leader of the Eternals. They leave to bring in Druig, who only agrees to help if they promise not to interfere with his affairs in Vorizakia. Well, I'll pronounce that 5 different ways. By the end of issue 5, the ground in Golden Gate Park begins to shake and the dreaming Celestial begins to stir. So there you go. That's issues 4 and 5. Let's talk about Sprite. It would suck to live in a 11-year-old body for millions of years. So I understand is what I should say. I don't identify because I am not a boy.
I was going to say, got something to tell us?
No. Yeah. So I understand him being upset and kind of like, what can I do to get out of this situation? Becoming mortal and making the others forget he is who he is probably the best thing to go.
I really felt like in terms of, I wouldn't say it's more as much a villainous scheme. I mean, it is. I mean, what he did was really wrong, and as somebody who's a few millennia old, I'm sure he is aware, which apparently I was reading the fact that Gaiman got it to where they aged some was to try and retcon some of the fact that there were different ages to certain Eternals.
Okay.
I mean, it's one of those, I understand like his thought process of like, I'm very tired of being 11 years old.
I did put in here, Druig is not a good dude. There's some time taken to focus on what he does to, number one, the guy that was kind of behind, or at least assisted in the potential. He's the guy that basically stuck the knife in his back during the hostage situation, and he was working for some other higher power. But Druig starts to use his powers towards that guy, and then he takes it to the military, and then he starts to use it on people who are not loyal to him, and it's not good. I mean, there's box cutters involved and blood spraying everywhere, people killing their friends. The other thing I have here is I like how the Deviants have their own version of events compared to what the Eternals have. Like the Eternals believe, hey, we're here. We were brought here by the Celestials. We were created by the Celestials to help humanity. The Deviants are, they're the bad guys, and that's why the Celestials came down and ate them all up. Or killed them, actually. I think their story is that they actually eliminated the land full of them. And the Deviants are like, no. We were food for the Celestials. They were growing us and eating us. And we had this one great Celestial that stood up for all of us. And they punished him for it by throwing him here on Earth and imprisoning him. And now we want to bring him back. And it's a great dichotomy when you look at it. You got two sides of the same story. One's being told a little bit differently to serve the other one's needs. And you see that all the time. I really, really did like that way of that little bit that Gaiman threw in here. So,
surprisingly enough, this was actually supposed to be a 6-issue series.
Yeah,
it said that on issue 5, Gaiman was like, I got too much. We might need 7 issues.
Yeah, I noticed that it went from the little symbol up at the top, and I think it was issue 4. It said issue 4 of 6, and then when you hit issue 5, it's issue 5 of 7. I think it's good because as we talk about what rounds out the series, I think it was needed because if they would have ended 6 where it was at, they could have ended it with Iron Man going up, hey, you need to register, and Zurus going, no, I don't want to register, and they're like, okay, all right, and then that's it. I
didn't see, I wasn't aware of the issue 7 initially. And I was like, that's a weird place to leave it off.
Yeah, same
and
here.
I was like, oh, there's another issue.
In our final 2 issues, Cersei and Icarus and Athena all arrive at Golden Gate Park to see what they can do to prevent the Celestial from waking, while Deviants across the world wait for the sun to rise to power the Celestial. Cersei tends to Mark, who may be in a coma, when Iron Man, Hank Pym, and Janet Van Dyne arrive to find out what's going on. Icarus convinces, I put that in quote, the others not to interfere. There's mind control in here. Hank Pym's like, he's got mind control, man. While the Eternals begin to create a Unimind to attempt to address the Celestial. When Ajax, Zurus, and Druig show up to join in the Unimind, the Eternals plan to use the Celestial energy to turn back time. Just a little bit. That is before the Celestial depowers them. It is at that time Mark has a vision. Finally accepting he is the eternal Makari, he converses with a representation of the dreaming Celestial, who informs him he planned to awaken and destroy all life on Earth before the Horde, which is, I put down here, picture a swarm of space locusts is what they said, would arrive to devour all life on the planet. However, after awakening, the dreaming Celestial was intrigued with humanity and instead will wait and observe humanity before making a judgment on his creation. The Celestial tells Makari he must tell the others of what he has been told. When Makari informs everyone of his vision, Iron Man wants to figure out a way to remove the threat of the Celestial from the Earth, but Makari says it would be of no use and there is nothing that they could do to act against it. Fast forward a little as the Eternals are back home at Olympia, an army of deviants led by a warrior named Kra appear at their doorstep demanding a fight. Makari requests the authority to address the challenge from Zurus, and he grants it, but takes his leave. After a rocky start to diplomacy, Kra is finally able to confirm his suspicions that Makari is the Skadrak of Deviant legend, a figure possessed by the spirit of the Celestials, and lore foretells that because of this, the Skadrak will be responsible for his own people's undoing. Satisfied, Kra takes his army and leaves. Meanwhile, Zurus catches up to Sprite on board a train, who is able to escape during the chaos of the events with the Celestial. Zurus says that Sprite almost destroyed the world with his actions, and he asks if mortality was worth it. Sprite has no regrets. Sprite asks if he has to go back to Olympia now, and Zurus says no, and that all journeys must come to an end. Sprite hugs Zurus, and they embrace for a moment, as Zurus raises his hand to the side of Sprite's head, breaking his neck, leaving the dead child on the train. As Zurus arrives at Olympia, he tasks Icarus and Makari with finding the other 90-plus Eternals and awaken them from their human lives. I mean, let's just talk about it. Zurus and Sprite, what'd you think?
It was done in a manner that shows that, they're both, they've been through a lot together and they understand kind of the consequences of what's happening. Like, I feel like Sprite kind of knew that when Zurus was there, like, is it. Like,
so did you see it coming?
No,
okay,
I didn't. But when it happened, I was not. I was surprised, but not surprised, if that makes sense.
Okay. I was surprised.
I didn't expect that to happen, but also, when I think of it logically, I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, how can he trust them considering that he more or less erased every single one of their memories? Who's to say that they can't do it again?
Right. I'm sitting there reading, and I don't know if it's just because I was like expecting some type of formula here that Zurus will show up, he'll talk to Sprite, and the Sprite will come back with him and live with him at Olympia, and we're at least maybe they'll figure out how to make him immortal again, or maybe give him his wish to become an adult somehow. And it's I think 3 panels. He's hugging him, and then you just kind of see him bring his hand up the next panel, and then it just says crack. Holy shit. Because I was so used to this formula of everything will work out for this kid. Certainly, they're not going to kill a kid on a train.
Yeah, I was, when it said crack, I'm like, you give him a good neck pop?
Oh, yeah. Man, oh, man.
Like, oh. And then I went and read it again, and I was like, oh, yeah, no. You can tell context-wise that, like, they both know what's going on.
They both accept it, and they both know what's got to happen.
Which, I mean, it's kind of, in a way, sad.
It is. It really is.
But at the same time, I think, the fact that I like the fact that I really feel that even, reading everything about the Deviants, part of me wonders how in the wrong are they, considering their entire race got genocided by these godlike beings. And you have this other group that's all up those beings' ass all day, and that were created by them.
Yeah,
and
they are
invincible and can kill all their people. Part of me felt bad for them, which I think was the point, of course.
Absolutely.
But I feel that a lot of our characters are very well-rounded.
Yeah.
You get there in the last issue. Yeah.
Athena.
She's told you cannot keep your kid.
What?
And he's like, well, I can keep my dog because it's not a child.
Uh-huh.
But he did make the point of, well, when you have to bury him, it's kind of that same caveat of, why immortality is kind of an awful thing because, everybody, around you eventually dies. Everybody's temporary. Also, a child being raised around a whole group of ageless, nigh invincible beings. I mean, what does that do for a kid,
Right,
like,
yeah.
Because he's obviously not old enough to know what, to be able to spell murdered, or was it killed?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she spells it out, so he doesn't know.
And he's just like, Dad's what?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're right. So that goes to support that Gaiman does a fantastic bit of world building in this first series. I mean, we end with it's the beginning. It's just, that's what they say. At the end, it says the beginning, because we get to know our characters. And that's kind of what this journey is, to kind of learn our characters, learn who their enemy is, and learn, what's driving each of these characters, deviants, whatever, throughout the book. Because, I mean, this feels like something like, okay, here's the basis for the next, 5 years of Eternal stories you're going to get. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't happen, does it? I mean, they get I think they said the next Eternal series that drops is 2 years in 2008. I hate to think about that. We got a lot of great character and world building here, and it just kind of doesn't really go anywhere. I'm really concerned, just like you said, I'm really concerned for Athena's son. How's that going to turn out? With Makari, the whole Skadrak thing, that's a big deal. I mean, something's going to happen at some point where he's going to fail the Eternals and cause their downfall, and the Deviants are perfectly fine with that. I'm hoping that they did find a way to continue at least a few of these threads. You said they were killed off, so I'm curious as to whether the Skadrak thing comes to be, or if they just don't even go back to that well. And plus, we end on a pretty decent cliffhanger. These aren't the only Eternals out there. There are about 90 other ones. So it's like, well, shoot, these guys got a journey ahead of them. They're going to go and find. And this could be another, at least a 2 or 3 set of 6-issue series, finding the other Eternals, bringing them in and doing some damage. So if that happens, great. But if it doesn't, I feel like it's something that was left on the, one of those opportunities that was missed. I really did enjoy this series. I thought it was, I didn't know an Eternal from an Eternal. It is a great introduction to some characters that I had no idea about. I know there's a lot of history before Gaiman getting his hands on them. But but he did a fantastic job with what he was given. And I may just find out if I can read some more about these characters, about the Eternals. So yeah, man. Okay, so what are your thoughts on these last 2 issues and final thoughts on the series?
I really like that the answer to "Are you going to register as superheroes?" is like, we're not superheroes. You don't have to worry about us. We're not on your side. We're not on their side. It's not a sides thing. When he explained it, it's like when you see 2 children arguing on the playground, you really pick a side on that. And I like that so much because it kind of brought a resolution to it, but also just kind of showed you where their mindset is and how they're so different from a lot of your other hero teams, really. And I love when Neil Gaiman gets a hold of Marvel properties. Like I love Marvel 1602.
1602. Yeah, I haven't covered that yet, but at some point I plan to. I remember reading that one.
Yeah, I do have that in trade paperback, actually. And I really love it. I love like reimaginings, like Gotham by Gaslight. It's one of my favorite Elseworlds stories in Batman. I love Elseworlds stuff, by the way. Like
we did a whole suite on here of I think we did Gotham by Gaslight. Actually, there was a storyline in DC called The Search for Ray Palmer.
Yep, I know that one.
Okay, and they are just going through Elseworlds, trying to find him. Yeah. So we actually covered that on here, and that was shortly after we did Gotham by Gaslight, and we did what's the Superman one? Red Sun.
Oh yeah, I love Red Sun. I got that. I read that from the library once. Yeah,
support your local library, folks.
I really love Red Rain.
Yes, but you and I have talked about doing that at some point, and that was back in 2015, 2014.
That was back in the before times.
Yes, it was.
But yeah, I still actually have. I have all 3 of those: Red Rain, Crimson Mist, and what was the third one? I love Kelly Jones's Batman art, by the way. I love like the obnoxiously long pointy ears.
Oh yeah.
Like I love that. I love his Batman art so much.
So the trilogy is called it's Red Rain, Bloodstorm, and then Crimson Mist.
Yeah, my local comic shop had that, and they also had all 4 issues of Dark Knight Returns in the original format as well.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I got that for like $20.
That ain't bad. That ain't bad at all.
Not at all. I wonder what that's worth now. That's an interesting question. I really enjoyed this. It makes me want to go seek out more Eternals properties, but like frankly, I know I'm not going to get the same necessarily.
Right.
It did have me somewhat excited to see the film, but one thing I will note in what I've seen from the trailers versus this comic is that I don't feel that the Deviants are going to be portrayed as an intelligent manner.
Yeah, I think we see that in the trailer. Like they just look.
They seem just like, which they could be. Perhaps they're not showing anything or showing everything. But I really like when you can give villains pathos. You know, like I felt like everybody in this story had a reason to be why they were, that in the right light you could justify it. And I really enjoyed that about this book.
When it's not so cut and dry, I'm right there with you.
I love when a villain, even when you know that the villain's not necessarily right, you know, like, but when you can see their line of thinking.
Yeah, you can see their side of things. Right.
And I like that. I feel like that is the hallmark of a good villain. I feel like that's what a lot of your Marvel films are frankly missing. And it also is missing the fact that they kill almost every single villain they get. That's part of the reason why Batman's Rogues Gallery has been around so long, and Spider-Man's, they're in the Flashes, they're also lauded, is because you get to have multiple stories with them, not just kill them off in one movie.
Yeah. Was there mention of the Celestials at all in the trailer? I can't remember.
No, but I think we see them.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So
we also see what looked like, I thought that was Galactus, but that could also be a Celestial.
Ooh. Well, I feel like I'm primed and ready to go see to go see it. I have a better idea of what I'm going to be getting. Well, I think this will bring our discussion of Eternals, Neil Gaiman's Eternals 1 through 7 to a close.
Hey, it's plug time, and you all know what that means. This would be a good time to plug the sponsor of the W2M network, and that is Grammarly. For you, the listeners of Source Material, Grammarly is offering a free download of the Grammarly software. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M network to download Grammarly for free.
So, Coop, why don't you go ahead and plug some stuff here? I know you got a couple things to plug, so let the people know where they can find you and where they can find the other things you want to promote.
Well, I mean, you can find me in your dreams, hearing my dulcet tones and sultry voice.
Oh, yes. Put the podcast on sleep mode.
That's right.
Sleep. Yep.
And then you wake up being like, was that a fart? Just like my lady friend Natalia, she's like, yeah, I tried to listen to one of your old podcasts, but oh my God, the audio quality. I'm like, oh, I used to record it on a cell phone.
Yeah, man. Wow.
And there were some, like, some of the old ones where the computer fan would go crazy.
Yeah, BTR was horrible. Oh my gosh.
So bad. Really, in terms of plugs, the Metal Hammer of Doom podcast, I would say we do it every Wednesday, but we got like a few more Wednesdays this year, and that's about it.
Yeah, not too far. Not too far in the end of the year.
Yeah, though you can also just pay attention to the Razzles from Broadcasting feed on Instagram, as well as here on, is it Spreaker? Do we use Spreaker?
We use Spreaker, yep.
We use Spreaker, I kind of figured. Keep an eye on that because there's going to be reposting a lot of Metal Hammer of Dooms from 2014. I think he's went through all the 2012 and 2013s.
Yeah.
Just, reposting lots of classic quality content.
That's right, buddy.
Check those out. In terms of stuff I'd like to promote, my friend Hannah, she has a podcast, Remind Me Why I'm Sober. It's a good one if she does it again. If not, it's going to be like all the other podcasts I used to do that are no longer around.
I'm going to hop into mine. Folks. All right. That's Robert Cooper's plugs.
Thank you all for joining us. Make sure to give that Rattlich in Broadcasting Facebook page a like to stay up on top of all the great podcasts we have to offer. We are at home on Spreaker, but you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, and recently we have hit the air on Spotify. Find your favorite podcast platform and type in RADULICH to subscribe for some great content. If you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word. And as always, we appreciate any feedback and look forward to entertaining you again soon.